Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property. Hello, Stu.
Hi Lorraine, how are you?
Well, I'm all right, love. Happy New Year.
New Year to you too.
So this is our first 2021, just the two of us, Stu. And I've got to say, love, how are you? That's the first thing we've got to ask, isn't it?
Well, I'm feeling fine, but I have had a positive. So in terms of COVID, I'm a COVID victim now. So
yeah, bless you. I'm not surprised though, given the area of the country you're in, I've got to say. So
what are you trying to say about us in Essex?
I'm trying to say, Stu, that perhaps it was inevitable, mate.
God, I don't know. I feel quite offended.
So how have you felt, lovely?
Not too bad. Yeah, I have to be honest with you. Apart from sort of having a backache and sort of pins and needles in my toes, it's not been as bad as I feared it might. So, in the grand scheme of things, when you get it, you can't really complain if you feel okay. So, apart from being sort of locked up in the house for nearly 10 days, not seeing anyone, it's not been too bad anyway, in the grand scheme of it all.
Oh, well, that's good, lovely. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, clearly you've kind of already, you've trailed the this Conveyancing Matters chat, because of course we're now into lockdown 3 that was announced on the 4th of Jan. I suppose at least Boris was on time for that one. And clearly, at the moment, at least while we're talking, the housing market is still open in the sense that people can still move. And really, it occurred to me, Stu, that given that we are back in lockdown for conveyancers and our estate agent friends, it does really mean that we're sort of kind of rinsing through a lot of the topics we've already talked about in the last few months. And you've got concerns, haven't you, about the extent to which, for example, firms can get staff working at home again. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the market's open, isn't it? So the government announced that the estate agents, the removal companies, they could also all continue to trade as long as it's in a COVID safe environment. So the market will continue, and I think the demand is still there, so I assume everything will carry on as normal per se. But with the schools being closed for, God knows how long now, it's going to make it very difficult for firms that have support staff where they have kids that, now they'll need to be working at home. So in terms of conveyancing, albeit we can carry on providing a remote service, we don't have to do things face to face, it's going to be difficult for firms to manage because, of course, a large proportion of staff will now be back at home working from home. So hopefully, most firms have managed to sort of set up their IT structures and so on and so forth to enable them to do that.
I think, though, actually, Stu, what's just occurred to me, you saying that, is I think one of the greater challenges, because, of course, what happened sort of March, April, May time last year is, of course, we went into that first lockdown. The housing market was never closed, but for all practical purposes, pretty much ground to a halt. People could still move. And of course, what happened during that period, and the schools closed as well, is that therefore a whole load of conveyancers were put on furlough. So actually weren't having to actually in reality juggle childcare and working. Whereas, what we're facing now at the beginning of 2021 is that very, very different, very sort of febrile situation where we've been talking for months about the enormous workload that conveyancers have got. So conveyancing firms, as you say, have got that really real challenge of having to manage that immediate post-Christmas sort of workload together with the much greater amount of work, as you say, with people at home with children. And I think that's going to put people right back under stress again.
Yeah, this time it will be totally different. To put it in some kind of context, the first lockdown, firms were very busy, sort of post-Brexit, and the market was very buoyant. And of course, at that point, everything was new, wasn't it? The virus was new, it was very scary, so on and so forth. There was no talk of the vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So, the market, I suppose when we say the market, conveyancing firms, remained open. We were a key trade as such, so we remain open. But estate agents, of course, were shut. There were, no viewings unless they were done sort of remotely or, via sort of IT mediums, etc. So it was completely different. This time, though, the government has specifically said that removal companies can continue, which they couldn't before. And again, estate agents can trade as long as they're COVID safe. So yeah, it's a completely different kind of market. I think also, it's a long time now that people have been sort of stuck indoors or been in this kind of climate. So I think the demand for people wanting to move is an all-time high. And of course, there's still the stamp duty holiday that ceases at the end of March, and that's still a massive incentive for people to want to move. So this time around, it's going to be as busy as we've been, with the challenges of potentially having less staff available. That'll be the issue.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult. I mean, obviously, the other sort of, conveyancing related issues that we've rehearsed before, Stu, clearly, apart from, mental health and stress, which I'm genuinely really worried about for conveyancers and conveyancing staff. I think it's been pretty unremitting. And I would say lots of people watching this actually will have been, probably because a lot of them are still working at home, they will have been dipping into their emails over Christmas and psychologically saying to themselves, well, actually, that's a really good thing because I've got rid of a bit of my backlog. But actually, that still means they haven't had a break, whichever way you look at it. I mean, I got very, very sort of mad over Christmas, because a few people on social media who I won't mention by name were, putting out this clickbait nonsense about, conveyancers closing for 2 weeks. And to be fair, I try to remain reasonably neutral on social media, but I have to say, I was angry enough to sort of, stick my head above the parapet and say, look, stop talking such nonsense. These people are on their knees. But I do find that whole, almost disregard for people's mental health, just because I want to get a bit of a reaction on social media, that really, really made me angry. And to be honest, people were doing it who frankly should have known better, I have to say. But
I think, realistically, when even the firms that were closed, as you say, I would imagine that there's plenty of people still working in the background anyway. That period in between has historically always been a really good time to actually get into the office and get loads of admin stuff out of the way and done anyway. So, whether it be sort of old-fashioned closing files or whatever you want to call it, I would imagine that most firms had some kind of presence, even if they weren't officially open, But what people always need to bear in mind is whether you open or not, that's all very well, but does the local authority open? Does the managing agent open? Does the landlord open? Are the banks all fully staffed? There's an element of some people not maybe understanding exactly what we do, and at the end of the day, we transact and we correspond with so many different third parties. It's all very well if you're there, but if they're not there, it's a complete waste of time.
Exactly. I have to say, and you kind of hit on, and this is probably a different conveyancing matters chat, Stu, but I've been saying for years, because I'm nothing if not dull, old, and repetitive, that this idea that larger conveyancing organisations can just put a whole bunch of conveyancing staff in headsets, or unqualified paralegals in headsets, and stick them all in a big room and have them available on a Saturday and Sunday. Well, as you say, where's the point of that? You're not offering a service to your clients, because as we you can get a bit of work done, but as you say, they can't liaise with anybody, they can't talk to anybody. So really, what additional benefit is it, apart from perhaps a bit of PR and maybe a USP?
We at PCS, we open on a Monday night and a Thursday night. I mentioned it previously on the show, that the actual level of interaction that we get on those evenings is very, very limited. And I would suggest, even if firms did open, the offices won't be fully manned. And the analogy of opening up over a weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, there's a distinct difference to having a phone line open where somebody rings, somebody answers, and a message is taken, to actually, work being progressed. Very, very different. And there are now sort of, answering facilities out there that have sort of pre-scripted or pre-scripts where they can provide information. So the office can be completely shut with a call centre, in a different geographical location, giving out sort of, scripted information, the basics, such as your address or bank details or whatever. But does that really mean you're open? Not really.
Not really. Well, I mean, before we move on to something else I wanted to talk about this current lockdown, I mean, just very briefly, let me use the C word, or the CC word, COVID clauses. Again, there's been a bit of sort of, muttering on social media about, make sure your contract's got the COVID clause in. Yeah. I'm no more convinced about those than I was 2, 3, 4 months ago, Stu. I'm sure you're not, to be fair. I don't think, I have seen a couple more recently that are shorter and by definition better, but I struggle with the concept that, fundamentally these COVID clauses require to work. They require the seller and the buyer and everybody in a chain to be reasonable and fair and all of those things. They still require an enormous amount of goodwill to work. And I hate to say it, but the public right now are under an extraordinary amount of stress. Our clients are under an extraordinary amount of stress. And in my experience, that scenario is not conducive to people being reasonable and level-headed. And I think...
I think if you take a step back, what are you trying to do? Well, at the moment, the removal companies, they're all open, the agents are open, so on and so forth. Law firms are open, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, transactional-wise, I can't see why things are going to be difficult. So individually, you could, of course, you could have a positive test result. That means you're isolating for 10 days. But of course, people will deal with those symptoms differently. Just because you've got to self-isolate for 10 days, some people after 10 days will be absolutely fine. Some people might have symptoms that go on for several weeks. And, when you do have a positive test result, the NHS are on the phone every other day, checking that you're staying put, you're not going out. And they want to know that, your symptoms are ceasing as your isolation period comes to an end. So what happens if they're not? How does it then get dealt with? That's not really going to be covered off in any kind of clause, is it?
I don't think so, really. As I say, I'm still not a fan. But what I wanted to kind of move on to, maybe perhaps open up a new part of this chat, is that, we've already touched on it, Stu, this idea that, the market is very much still open for business. But even, on the first morning after the lockdown was announced, Stu, what I've certainly seen on social media, an estate agency today, the well-known, sort of online publication for estate agents, interestingly has done a poll already. Yeah. Because somebody put it quite well and said, something along the lines of, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So this idea, should estate agents actually be open? And broadly speaking, there was a pretty even split, really, because according to estate agent today's figures, should the agents stay open and do COVID secure viewings and appraisals? That's really where this was going. 40% of the respondents said yes, 28% just said a straight no, close the market, and 22% were half and half and said, yes, but providing we can work at home. So, there's no clear consensus within the estate agency world.
I think it depends who are asked to give those opinions. If it was an employee or a business owner, they would have two completely contradicting thoughts. I would have thought a lot of employees would love the chance to be closed, so on and so forth, whereas business owners might not. So I don't know whether that has an impact. But
I don't know, Stu. I mean, thinking aloud, but at the end of the day, we are facing a much more virulent strain, and an employer, of course, whoever they are and wherever they are, not just our agent friends, but they've got a duty to their employees at the end of the day. So I think more of them might, particularly while the furlough scheme still exists, they might be more encouraged to perhaps reduce their staffing levels. And
maybe, but I think as an employer, surely you go on government advice. Whether we could all talk all day long about what we think about Boris and sort of our opinions on the schools are safe, shut the schools, you can go and see everybody at Christmas, now you can't. All our opinions on Boris are what they are, but surely as a business owner, you go on government advice. And if the government advise that you are allowed to stay open, then I would say that your obligations as an employer to your employees are satisfied, as long as you're doing it in a COVID safe environment.
Yeah, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? Because if you get an employee who catches COVID and something unpleasant happens to their long-term health or worse, well, the argument's going to be that it's going to fall on the employer, because the argument will be, well, they didn't put the guidance, they didn't put this provision in place to make it COVID secure to comply with the guidelines. The government's still rowing backwards. The government's still saying you can do it providing it's secure, and that proviso sort of puts the gap between the government advice and the employer. The onus is still on the employer, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Oh, most certainly. But I think from what I've seen and the contacts within the estate agency we have, even just by sort of walking past estate agent offices, the volume of social distancing now is standardised. I do think it is possible to walk around somebody's house in a safe way. You can have sort of latex gloves and masks and everything like that. So I think the industry has adhered to, doing it in as safer way possible. And, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because people's opinions are so different, and there's still people that think there's a conspiracy theory out there that COVID doesn't exist. So you've got so many different extremes, and of course everybody's the expert, aren't they? We all
yes, of course.
best. So I know nothing about any medical scenario whatsoever. So all of a sudden I'm a COVID expert. It's a difficult one, isn't it? But I think you've just got to, if it's your business, you've just got to take the government advice and do the best you can.
Right, as best you can. I've got a slightly more radical theory here, Stu, because I was trying to be logical about this. So if, say, for example, a significant percentage of estate agents aren't really going to actively do viewings and appraisals in the next couple of months to take properties onto the market, clearly we accept that those transactions that are already underway or that clearly have already exchanged, we as conveyancers are going to carry on with them. That's a given. But of course, what the phrase you and estate agents use a lot is our pipeline. So if a percentage of agents are not taking on those properties in the next couple of months, and I can understand why they might not want to do that, I wonder whether that's just going to lead to a sort of natural cooling of the market anyway between now and the end of March. I mean, we've already seen lots of firms saying to clients, look, if you're not ready to go now, you're not moving by the end of March anyway. So I wonder whether the corollary of that would be that actually the government, because the market's going to cool down naturally, theoretically, or it's possible, whether the government will say, well, actually, we don't need to extend the stamp duty land tax deadline, because at Easter we'll have that pent-up demand thing that we had back in sort of May, June of this year of 2020, and therefore the government can really stand back and not have that pressure to do anything with the SDLT deadline. What do you think? I know your view's a bit different to that.
Can't see it. I just can't see it. I think that everything the government have tried to do so far has been very much sort of people pleasing orientated, and I think that they're never ever going to announce that stamp duty holiday will be extended at this stage. I would have thought at best it will be around the budget in early March, but I could even see it the week before it being.
Yeah, I have to say I agree in the sense that I've always had the view that if they were going to extend it, they would never do it now. It would always be a really late, last minute decision. But
I think there'll be too much uproar from too many people that stand to lose out as a result of the lockdown and the sort of rules that the government have brought in. So I think because of that, they would deem it too unfair that people miss out. And I think the furlough was extended. It was a surprise to me when they extended it to the end of April. I can't see again why the stamp duty is not going to be extended, even if it's by a small amount of time. And I think, that with regards to demand on the market, I have to admit that one thing I've noticed being sort of isolating for 10 days is that, there's not a hell of a lot to do. It's so boring that you do tend to chase everything up. So all the admin that you've got to do, I've sort of got on top of and chase people up. And of course, invariably that's what's happening to us conveyancers. Our clients are feeling the same, and I just think that it's probably never has been as important to have bricks and mortar around you, and I think that's what people will think. And I think that because of that, the demand is just going to carry on. I can't see any dip on the market whatsoever. even though we are in this lockdown.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to, and maybe if any colleagues watching this who are in, different geographical areas, I'm in East Anglia, you're down, in Essex. I don't know whether the market is demonstrably different in terms of conveyancing demand, but I would certainly be really interested to know from people whether actually their experience about the level of demand in their location is somewhat different to that, which, I mean, certainly, I'm locoming around here and it's extraordinarily busy. Without any shadow of...
We monitor the work that we intake every month, and some of the software we have enables us to geographically pinpoint where it comes from, and we monitor the volume levels that we receive from different counties all over England, and there's not been any that have shown a significant drop.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So to us, it's been constant from south to north across the board.
Well, I'd be really, I think it would be really interesting.
It'd be interesting to hear from other people whether there's difference. Yeah.
To engage with us. Well, Stu, probably time for us to wrap up this one. I think we could probably carry on chatting, to be honest. But
always.
Clearly, I'd really like to wish you well, bless you, and I'll obviously see you really soon. But and frankly, obviously, I think we really just need to wish all our lovely conveyancer and estate agency colleagues, well. In lockdown 3, as we said, I think we're in a very different place to where we were in March, but nonetheless, I hate those emails that sign off "stay safe." I do kind of slightly feel that that is a really important message for people at the moment. So
most definitely, I think the way the virus is now spreading, that is the underlying sort of message, isn't it, for everyone?
Yeah, I think so, and I think probably as an afterthought, that's another issue for agents, isn't it? Because of course, we, as conveyancers, we can stay pretty, literally pretty sort of isolated or pretty secure. And estate agent employers and businesses can put their own safety measures in place. But of course, you are expecting your estate agency colleagues to go out into the world, and go into people's homes. And of course, you've got absolutely no control over what people are doing in their homes, which I think, presents a much greater risk,
danger,
to say. But well, anyway, Stu, look after yourself, my lovely.
Yep, and, you too.
And I will see you very soon.
Take care. Bye. Bye.